Good morning, everyone. How is everyone? Doing well? All right. Welcome to Empower Your Digital Creativity with Shutterstock AI. My name is Ambroziak. I'm a producer on the creative strategy team at Shutterstock. I'm a 25-year creative agency veteran, and for a large part of that, I was a freelancer. And because of that, I was always looking for ways to have edge over my competition. That means that I often embrace new technologies as they emerged. That meant I went from being a web and graphic designer in the 1990s to really getting into Flash when that arrived. And then I started bringing in motion design elements into my Flash sites again to give it a bit of an edge. And then before I knew it, I was a fully fledged motion designer by the mid-2000s, before I even knew what motion design, that it was even called motion design. And then from there, I naturally got into 3D, VFX, video editing, and then more recently, Unreal, and of course, generative AI. I help anyone within the company that needs it. Often that comes from marketing or sales, but quite often that comes from Shutterstock Studios, which is our agency division. And with them, I've had the pleasure of working with some of the world's biggest brands. More than anything, I'm an idea guy. I'm a concept guy. I love getting a brief and then finding creative and playful ways to work within a company's branding. And speaking of branding, I've done quite a lot of it for many companies, including Shutterstock. Now, do you see the dragon in the bottom right there? That's my youngest idea. He made me promise to tell you that was his. These are all products that we've launched with Shutterstock. These are all from our VFX line called Shutterstock Elements. We went out and shot 60-foot explosions, muzzle flashes from guns, smoke, ice, lens flares, you name it. We shot it all organic, no CGI. Now, like many of you, I've been aware of AI for quite some time. And to me, it's always been like some sort of abstract danger, like an asteroid on the outside of the solar system. It's fine as long as it doesn't come anywhere near us. But about 2 years ago, it well and truly impacted Earth. And I'll be honest, when I first started using generative AI tools, I had a moment of existential dread where I could see the entire laptop latte middle class being completely wiped out. And that might still happen, but the more that I use these tools, the more my thinking went from this to something more along the lines of this, which is really about embracing the fact that change is inevitable. And then from that, really now, these days, my thinking is much more like this, which is, hold on a minute, this technology is absolutely incredible. Without a doubt, it's completely changed the way that I work. And in many ways, I think we're in the position that our parents were when the internet arrived. Everything is changing as we watch. I'd like to thank Ramin Nazar for allowing me to use his artwork. You can find it at rainbowbrainskull.com. Now, let me ask you a question. As designers, why are we really here? Now, I ask that both in the grand philosophical sense, but I also mean, like, why are you sitting here today? I think that at some point, like me, you stumbled upon and fell in love with the creative flow state. Now, we all know what that is. That's where the world disappears. Friends who are musicians, my sister's a copywriter, and they all describe the same thing. And in many ways, I think this is what actually makes us human. Crabs get claws, scorpions get stingers. We get the ability to take something from our mind and put it out into the real world. And this is what I'm always looking for. No matter what medium I'm working in, this is what I'm going for. In 2022, Shutterstock was getting ready to launch its own image generator platform. And as is pretty typical, the marketing team came to me and said, we're making a blog post and we need some images for it. And I said, like, how many do you need? They said around 400. I said, okay, but in how long? They said, by the end of the week. I was like, all right. And the reason for that is because I know from experience that the best way to learn how to do anything is just being thrown in the deep end and learning how to swim. And then to my pleasant surprise, I found that my tried, tested, and true design process was working with prompting. And by that, of course, I mean you get a brief, you gather references, you incubate on those ideas. I like to go for a run, take a shower, think about it. And then you try those ideas out and experiment. And quite often, they don't work. And if you're a designer, you know exactly what this feels like. The doubt starts to set in. The voices in your head start to say things like, maybe the muse has abandoned you. Maybe you've been a fraud this whole time. But then as long as you stick with it and keep the faith, the clouds will part, the sun will shine, and then you see the pathway to completion. And that's really why I do this. This is my favorite moment, the breakthrough, and it clicks. And then it's just about refining and adjustment. Also, to my pleasant surprise, as I was going along, I found that everything from my career history, from photography, 3D, lighting, texturing, color grading, even things like art history and film history, were all working with prompting. It was like I didn't even have to learn it. And I was like, wow, okay. And it was about then I remember looking down at the clock to see what time it was, and it was midnight. And I realized that time had just dissolved and gone away. And that's when I realized that prompting is a creative flow state. And when I realized that, that was it. The handbrake was off. I was absolutely all in. It also made me realize something else that I like to call the generative AI paradox, which is that creators with the most to lose to AI, like people like me and like many of you, are actually the best qualified to use it. which also means that we have the most to gain by embracing this new technology. It's a strange situation we find ourselves in, yet here we are. Now, I said that prompting is a design process. Well, what about prompting as a design process? Well, this is my process, and this has been tried and true for me for about the last 18 months. I like to start by thinking about the composition and perhaps the camera position. And then I like to add small incremental design changes bit by bit. And I'm very careful to generate every single time I change something because I want to see how the AI is reflecting that. We're herding cats here, and the only way to herd cats is definitely one cat. A word or term appears within the prompt early on, and the system will weight it heavily, and vice versa. Reinforcement means photography or 3D. Lighting is absolutely essential. It sets the tone, it sets the mood, it sets everything, and I'll often change that many, many times during a session. And then one of the advantages of using our system is that you can go to our regular website and change from searching image, video, or vector, and you can change it to generative AI. And then you can see anything that was made based on your search, previous generations, and you can take pieces of the prompts that were used to make that because we include the prompt with every single image. So then you can take pieces of that, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time. And then, of course, refinement. Now, by now, we've all seen the most amazing, spectacular, awesome AI images. And that's great if that's your hobby and you can make anything. But it's all games until you really have to deliver something to a brief, to a branding. And that's exactly what we do at Shutterstock Studios. And what you see here is all exactly that. And the way that this is done is by the exact process that I described. We build prompts up from the bottom up, being very careful to make sure that they're nice and reliable. We go for reliable, stable, detailed prompts that we can reuse and template by controlling a few variables. And what that looks like is something like this. Anything you see in color is a variable. Of course, it's a prompt, so everything is a variable. But what we like to do is lock it down to just a few of them. So if we take the image in the top left here as an example, we could say, young white woman with blue hair, cute 3D cartoon character. Now that's what I mean by priority. By putting that early on in the prompt, we're letting it know that we don't want to have photographs proportionate. So I had to add large cartoon eyes. That was also working, but they were a little bit unstable. So I added the term perfect eyes, and that helped to stabilize the prompt. And this is what I mean by reinforcement. Sometimes you have to reiterate something a few times. Wearing white blouse, gradient orange background, smiling. Now the word smiling is bang in the middle of the prompt. And again, this is about 3D render. These are further forms of refinement to really lock down the prompt. The more detailed the prompt is, the more stable it will be and more reliable to reuse. But when I added the term 3D render, everything got a little too glossy and shiny, a little bit like the eyes. So I lent on my 3D background and I added the term ambient occlusion, and that helped to rough everything out and add nice shadowing. Cute, ultra-realistic video game avatar, further refinement, really lock in the prompt. And then, as I said, lighting, absolutely essential. Warm overhead lighting sets the tone to be consistent, and as you can see, the light angle coming down at the top of the head and the shadowing. And this is what it looks like in the real world. These are characters that we built for a mobile game, and we did it using this prompt. You can see it's nice and detailed and reliable. And then all we have to do is change a couple of words, and then we get another character that looks different in the lapel, and then we can even set nice and consistent posing. These are all examples of material that were made for games that's using that exact process. These are backgrounds, level design, concepting, and as you can see, everything here is nice and consistent, and that's because the prompts are stable and reusable. Now, of course, we're not limited to illustration, and in one of the ways that I find that AI really outshines other mediums is its scalability. And we like to say, whether you need 5 or 5,000 images, we have it covered. For this project, what we did was we went into a lot of detail about the room, the lighting, and then once we had that really locked down, all we had to do was describe different camera positions and food, and then we could roll out all these different images. This is a good example of what clients are coming to us for. In this case, it was a cosmetics company that wanted to be able to place its product within a scene. And every single time that I'm prompting, some new challenge arises. But I like to look at it like a puzzle. In this case, it is, how do you have a wide open space big enough to place a product and have the camera point at it? And the thing is, it's a little bit more difficult than you think because there's really nothing for the AI to know. You can't tell it, like, please focus camera on empty space. It doesn't work. The solution to this that I found was you go into a lot of detail about the surface that it's on, in this case, reflective marble, and then describe out the background after that. And then this is how we insert the 3D digital twins. We generate the backgrounds and then we composite in 3D models for it, and we can scale this up to as many as a client needs. Here's another real-world example for a major cosmetics company. The challenge here was that we had to match both their summer and winter branding. And this was done without any custom model training, anything like that. This was done using a design process of building it from the bottom up, using prompts only. Everything you can see there, even down to the gold trim and the ribbons. Now, the other way that I find AI really, really outshines other mediums is ideation. If you work in 3D, at some point you've accidentally moved the light or changed its temperature and got a different look and been inspired. Or if you're a graphic designer, you've changed the font by accident and been like, oh, hold on a second. And what do we call that? We call those happy accidents. And if you're lucky in that world, you might get this once or twice a day. Well, with AI, it's happening all the time. And I call it happy accidents in overdrive. And then when you get used to this and you know it's going to do this to you, you get in a bit of a human AI feedback loop going back and forth. I included this because this is exactly what happened. I was doing a demo for a client, and I was going for the image in the bottom middle there. And then one of the images that it generated was the one to the left of it, which wasn't exactly what I was going for, but I was like, hold on a second, I like this concept. And then using that, I made all the others based on that, the results from that prompt. Here's another example of something a client wanted. In this case, they wanted hundreds of images with almost impossible hairstyles and colors. Now, typically, if someone comes to us and they want to have people, we recommend that we do a full photo shoot with models. But in this case, because of the volume and the brief, we realized that AI was the right way to go, because to hire this many models, colorists, hairstylists, photographers, this project just basically never would have happened. It would have been too cost prohibitive. So AI was the perfect solution for this. Here's some examples we made for a fabric company. What they wanted to do was have certain patterns and then be able to ideate colors through them. So we set them up prompts with variables, and then all you have to do is change the colors and you can see it right away. I included the ball there because happy accidents, who doesn't love those? Coming from a video background, storyboarding is a huge part of what I do, and I'll be honest, I never enjoyed it. And it's not so much the storyboarding itself, it's because we would lock in with the client, the storyboard, we'd get it locked down, we'd go into production, and then inevitably I'd get into my creative flow state, get into production, and start coming up with new ideas as I was going, but it's too late. Everything's already locked in the storyboard. And I always found that super frustrating. Now with AI, what we do is we do the whole process. We do art direction, ideation, storyboarding, all at the same time, and that's completely changed the way I work. And everything you see here are examples of storyboards and style frames using that exact process. And here's one in the real world. This is for a piece we're doing. Here, we start in the top left. The sun is shining through the trees. The wind starts to pick up. The leaves start to blow off the trees. They all start to form into a kind of a ball. It sort of shatters, pulls away, and we have a young tree. The camera pulls back, and there's a space to place the product that's made of all natural ingredients, which is ironic that we're using AI to say that. But as you can see, the colors here are all nice and consistent. We can control it. We can artboard it. We can do everything with it. And then we can run some very simple animatic tests for proof of concepting to see, like, yeah, this is definitely going to work. This would have taken days and days to do before AI. Now we can do this in a matter of hours, and it's completely changed everything. One of the other advantages of working with Shutterstock is that we're running simultaneous models at the same time. Because of our partnerships with OpenAI and Google, we have our own versions of DALL-E and Imogen. And this is from a demo I did for a shoe company, and I just took the same prompt and ran it a whole bunch of times. And you can see that it did everything from black and white to photoreal to stylized to so heavily stylized that it's illustrative. There's no right or wrong. It really just depends on what you or your client is looking for. And here's an example of a prompt. You can try this yourself on our system, and these are results that I got from it. The two images on the left are DALL-E based, and you can see they're a little bit more stylized. The ones on the right are Imogen based, and they have a little bit more of a minimal look. I like them all, but I think I prefer the more stylized ones on the left. Here again, we have another example. This is the prompts that I used. Now, the two images on the left, this time I find a little too stylized, whereas I prefer the ones on the right. So that's great in theory, but what about in practice? Well, this is it. This is the Shutterstock image generator. This is a video I captured, and I've sped it up by about 30 times, and I've cut out the image processing time, which is typically about 20 seconds a time. And I'm building a prompt from the bottom up, being sure to generate every single time that I make any sort of changes, as you can see, because I want to be able to control for what it is. I'm going more and more detail, more design choices here. I put the term golden hour because I want to add that kind of golden kind of sunlight. It was a little too strong there. And here I'm saving a couple of generations because sometimes the prompting goes way off track and I need to roll back and come back to it. It's about here that I realized that just adding the term backpack wasn't enough to have the subject face away from camera, so I had to actually specify back to camera. Here I'm adding some things like film grain, small design changes, and I don't know if you just caught that, but that's what I mean by priority. I'm shifting words around within the prompt to see what the results will be. I'm liking some of these early results. They're looking pretty good. We're getting close to the reference, and this is always what I do. I work to the reference. Here I'm adding terms that I know are going to get certain effects. And to me, as I said, here I'm in a creative flow state. I'm just doing what I know works. If I was working in ZBrush, I'd be doing certain techniques that I picked up along the way. If I'm working in Photoshop, it's the same thing. To me, prompting is exactly the same process, just making small changes that I know will work. I'm adding terms like warm tones, and I'm moving some things around. And I said that every single time that I'm prompting, some challenge inevitably will present itself. In this case, it was focus. Sometimes the camera was insisting on focusing on the background and not the foreground. And this is pretty typical of a generation process. You're always going to run into something like that. In fact, here, you can see it here. The camera is insisting on focusing on the background. I wrestle with it. I go around with it. And now I'm adding more design changes. I'm liking it. And really what I'm doing here, I'm working to get the two models to be much closer to each other. And the way I do that is by adding more and more detail, more and more detail. A few more changes here, but typically I'll give myself about half an hour for this process to see if it's good. Anything past there is really diminishing returns. This is a proof of concept before production. Here I'm adding what I'm looking for. At this point, I really wanted to get from the reference a couple more comparison. Now, of course, what a client wants, and that's fine. At that point, we can just make small changes and alterations to it and roll it out. So here are the results from that session with the prompt that I ended up using. You can see it's long and detailed, and you can also see that side by side, the two different models ended up looking quite similar to each other and quite similar to the reference in something that we call trust. And that is training. All of our partnerships are based on a large majority. All the training is done on a huge majority of our image library. Nutters who contributed to the training of the library option to us. We want to promote representation that reflects the want to, and transparency is that. We're applying all these tools to AI in photographs, which is pretty incredible when you think about. So in the real world, which is the world I'm in, if only the camera wasn't so punched in, if only it was a little bit further out and I had some license that AI edited image, the contributor who uploaded that photograph gets paid in full for that image. So we found a way to increase the revenue for human beings using AI generator. And this is thanks to my name is Alex. I'll be over there. I'd love to geek out about this sort of stuff. So let's chat. Thank you.